1. During 2019, when I was 24, still living at my mother's house near West Covina, California, my mother and stepfather used to sleep early, since they would have to wake up around 4 or 5 a.m. for work every day. We lived in a 3-room house, which they had the far left room, and I took the room at the end of the hallway to the right-hand side of the house, and the other room was a spare bedroom where people can crash for the night. I would come home a bit late sometimes and wouldn't make it back home till where my mother was asleep or just about to sleep when I would go to the gym. During one night particular, a couple months before I moved out from living with my mother, I had some unexplained things happen. I came back home from the gym, tired as hell, as it was around 11-ish, usually the time when my mother would be asleep, or about to start getting things ready for her workday, a bit before. When I walked in, I heard walking in the kitchen going into the spare bedroom, where there is a door to go into the spare bedroom. I started following it because I thought it was my mother, and also because I always used to walk that way, because there are 2 doors in the spare bedroom, one going to the kitchen, and one leading to the hallway that connects also my room, and my mom's room, so it would be more quiet since it's closer to my room. When I finally get to the doorway transition from the kitchen to spare room, the footsteps stop, and I'm also in complete dark, and when they stop, I notice my mom and stepdad's loud but nothing out of the ordinary snoring. That's when it dawned on me. There was no one I knew, or no one there, to be making walking noises. Keep in mind, the house has old wooden floors, so you can hear every step super loud, except for tile in the kitchen, but even in the kitchen I heard the walking going to the spare room. After I told my mother, she told me it was weird because around the same week when she was home and I was at work and my stepdad was on his way back from work, she was alone and she heard a loud sound, like if someone threw something hard against the floor. When she went into my room, which I didn't like her doing in general, she checked my whole room because she was freaked. Nothing was on the floor, or nothing fell. When it was around 1 or 2 in the morning, I heard a little kid, in a little kid's voice, say, "Hello," one day, which scared me so bad I didn't sleep at all that night. After those incidents, since my room was in the back corner of the house facing the backyard, which, keep in mind, my stepdad's house has a huge backyard, I would hear a bunch of walking noises and noises from my stepdad's old fence that would surround the house. I cannot explain how these things happened, and it still sends shivers down my spine a bit as I think about it. And I could just be a skeptic, which in some ways I am, but I heard this stuff clear as day, so it has me scratching my head. What do you all think? 2. I've thought my house has been haunted for a long time, but recently it's been getting to me a lot more. I've had a few experiences, normally they'd be pretty big ones, but always happen few and far between. My family lives in an old farm, 15.5 acres, pretty big, with forests and a very nice place with 3 main barns. One is the Red Barn. We built half of it into an actual house and still use part of it for sheep. It's the newest barn in the area, the Black Barn, very old and worn down. We keep extra wood and stuff in there, and lastly, the House Barn. The house barn is the oldest, over 500 years old, and when it was built, it used absolutely no nails. That was just for setting up the area. Now, onto what I think has been decently active activity. The first encounter I had a few years ago, it was pretty late, and I was about to go to sleep from watching a movie. I looked over onto the other couch across from me with a controller, and I watched it turn from being horizontal to vertical to face me. It moved incredibly slowly and just odd. Nothing I can really think of that was a large event happened before what I think is the biggest one I've had. I'd been trying to sleep. Only my mom was home, and I knew she hadn't left her room when I hear someone trying to open my door, like they had been rattling with the knob. My door doesn't shut properly or lock, and was easily able to be pushed open then, in my mom's voice and perfectly monotone I hear, "Help, Help me. That's what got me, and suddenly it just stopped. I hear heavy footsteps walk around. Lights turn on after I know I'd left them off. Dogs barking at nothing and getting bad vibes, or suddenly getting super cold in one area. With the history of our farm, I'd have to assume that maybe it's an Amish spirit who died working on the barn. But I also have neighbors just down the gravel road who I happen to be friends with one of the kids. And their older sister is an occultist, and she's done many spells in their house. And recently, she apparently let something loose. My main worry is that this could be evil or a type of mimic, as it seems to be attached to my mom, who's heard her name called throughout the house when she's alone or in bed. And no one who lives at my house calls her by her name, we just say Mom. I've heard many coyotes, almost truly right outside my window, yet the dogs never bark, which make me think they might be scared of it. I honestly don't know. I'd like to figure it out, and see if there is even one spirit here, or any at all. I'm pretty paranoid about these sort of things, and don't want anything to happen, and would be very open to suggestions. 3. Back in 2019, I finally signed up to get a Reddit account. Before I would just read random movie subreddits and mainly MMA subreddit. I was mainly looking for doppelganger-related stories, and I found the elevator game ritual posts. I never did it, but my interest was piqued. The energy I got from just reading it was creepy. I then found the Three Kings subreddit and read the rituals there. Again, never did any of them. I'm fairly spiritual, know about channeling and wearing crystals and gems. I know about the paranormal, but do not actively seek it out. Mostly an open-minded and positive person. I meditate, don't drink or do any drugs. I was working as a slot attendant at this time from 4 p.m. to 12 a.m. One day, going to work, I step out the main door to my apartment complex to my car. Immediately on the sidewalk leading out the door, there was a chalk drawing of hopscotch squares with numbers. But the interesting thing is the numbers were that from the elevator game ritual, and at top of the hopscotch square was a stick figure trying to get a star. I'm thinking, okay, interesting, but I will not be afraid. Then at work, I have to carry a radio and keys to help people with jammed tickets and money. I was in the middle of the casino when I get called by one of the security guards to come to a slot machine by the cashier window. I acknowledge and make my way. While at the machine, which was a multi-game touchscreen where you can select different games, the customer had a ticket jammed, which was an easy fix. On the screen was a game called Three Kings. I laughed in my head, but I knew something was up. Then at home, while sleeping, I got visited by 3 witches that come out of my top bed frame. 2 of them sat by my lower left bed, while the third one sat in my chest and bounced up and down. Then outside my window I would see shadows move about. It was around May 2019, and thinking it's only the spring breeze, but what made it bizarre was a wind blowing on top of my window. But the sound was that of a male spirit. It was projecting energy. This was after the 3 witches visiting me. It made a woo-woo sound. It lasted for 3 months, and I realized it was protecting my apartment, as I asked for protection for my spirit family. Then another time at work, I was by the blackjack tables and my radio did a static noise. It was a weird noise. There were people close and such, but I got weirded out by it. I asked another slot attendant who was close by if he heard the weird static noise. He said no. After a bit, I decided to take a break, and decided to go to the men's locker room as the break room was full of people. The locker room itself is small. You walk in, there is a wall. You have to walk left, then there is a big locker to put your dirty uniform. Then you have to turn right, and then there are lockers and a small bench. In the back was the bathroom, that's it. So while I was on the bench, on my phone, facing the front way, I hear that weird static noise in my radio. Then I felt a girl's spirit in the bathroom, like she got teleported there. She didn't seem friendly. I get up with the quickness and bolted out of the locker room. There are a few more creepy things that happened, but I wanted to share these first few. basically from reading the elevator game Ritual. Sounds dumb and trivia, but this was what happened to me. Love and light. 4. So I've been renting a room in a one-story house for the last couple of years. There have been a lot of strange things that would occur over the months within the house, although I did wonder as whether to tell my Chinese landlord about it or not. I assumed she already knew, as there had been prayer bells playing on repeat radios within the house and garage, each one mysteriously disappearing on occasion. At first, I thought it had just been my roommates becoming annoyed with the constant bells and prayers, until I lived in the house alone, and things would mysteriously go missing. My boyfriend at the time returned to Taiwan for a little while. I had promised him I'd keep the room for him when he returned. During some of the months, I would be the only tenant in the house, all the rooms becoming empty as time went on, only to be filled by new tenants. The house became a revolving door. I would at times hear a little girl crying in the middle of the night. I'd smell cigar smoke when I was the only person in the home. I chalked that up as just wafting in from outside somewhere. But at times it was strange, unexplainable even. I would sometimes feel heat upon my face, hot, almost like a flame, only moments later to smell that familiar strong cigar smoke. When I wasn't alone in the house, on occasion, I would hear a tenant yelling on the phone with the landlord on the other line. It would usually have something to do with not being told that the house was haunted. Once again, I figured that she already knew. Eventually, I wanted to record my experiences in the house. Whenever I'd hear the girl crying, I would try to record it. Footsteps in the house, and I'd open my bedroom door in the dark corridor, trying to capture at least something unexplainable that I've seen, so I could gather proof. There had been plenty of times when I opened my door to see a pale, ghostly floating face, a Caucasian man in his mid to early 20s, and only his face staring back at me from the dark. I had no Caucasian roommates, let alone any roommates without bodies and just floating faces. Yet when I would lift my phone to record, my phone would shut off as if it had no battery. There had been times when I did record or take a photo for the photo to appear distorted or not even be in the gallery at all. It was tricky trying to catch them, but I eventually did. I felt quite alone in the city, to be honest. I'd wake up, go to work, and come back home to watch TV or Netflix. Some nights I'd hear my dad's voice or my sister's voice coming from the hallway, despite the fact that they lived in different states than I did. It would say to let them inside. It would happen so often that I grew to ignore it by putting my headset on and listening to music. My cousin moved in one day. My family wanted him to help keep me safe. He often had a lot of things happen to him in the house. Things would be thrown at him. He'd wake up with scratches and burns. While I was in the shower at times, I'd hear a woman whisper in my ear, "Don't trust him." I'd turn and no one would be there. I thought I was just sleepy, and I'd try to explain it off as maybe someone talking outside. And it just felt like it was right up to my ear. Whatever I could to explain it. Later on, he proved to me that he was one of the most dangerous people in the city, although at first I didn't understand why he was always attacked in the house. I guess the ghosts had been right. I made him leave. I was once again just trying to survive on my own in the city, waiting for Mark to come back. I would often try to stay out of the house. I would go out with friends to distract myself. Boba, food, games, whatever I could, to just not think about waiting or the house. I made some new friends in the city. They seemed nice at first, until I realized it was simply a facade. Most people are nice, and I often try to see the good in people. But given I was a female alone in the city, I should have been more careful. This part of the story ties into the current goings-on within the house. As the months went on, I bought a spirit box. I would ask questions and they would answer. At one time I asked, "Where is Mark?" just to see if they knew, and they responded accurately, with his squad. I would talk to them like I would with normal people. I respected them, and in some way it made me feel less alone until I turned it off. Still being careful about it, and for months I wouldn't talk to them. Things in the room would move around in front of me on their own, knocks at my door in the middle of the night. But still, I just tried to move on from it, and I acted like the house was just like every other house. Mark told me not to talk to the spirits. Given an experience we'd had in an apartment a few years ago, my family and his family say that I have a gift just like my mom and dad. But I never really knew my mom. I would often come home, and if something bad happened that day, it was like they already knew. Things in the room would be thrown, the lights would turn off on their own. Sometimes I would go through my room trying to find something. I'd lay on the bed and just close my eyes upon trying to find it, and I'd feel a pressure on my stomach as if something fell on me from the ceiling, only to look down, and whatever I was looking for was right there. It happened quite often. One day I just laid in bed thinking. The overhead light in the room turned off, and I was laying in the pitch-black room, only my solar panel lights remaining on. I picked up my phone and started to record. I asked them, "Are you there?" The light turned on in the closet and then back off. I began to ask them about my new friends, and it was like they already knew. The light would turn on for yes and remain off for no. In the end, I asked them, "Do we get along?" The light turned on. It remained on for the rest of the night. I was quite upset with those new friends for a little while. When Mark returned, he and the landlord took me to a temple after the landlord said she saw a black fog in my room. I explained some of the spirits I'd seen and described them to them. The landlord confirmed that she knew the house was haunted. We went to the temple to meet with a monk she trusted. Although he didn't know what we discussed, he had described the spirits in the same way I had described them to her. Mark and my landlord looked over at me, their eyes wide, after receiving a confirmation. The ghosts. A man who was hung, a little girl, a little boy, a man who had died in a car accident, a tall shadow, a weeping woman in a white dress. He confirmed it all. Then the landlord asked him to remove the spirits from the home. They later came to the home, and although I am sad they may be gone, I am happy they're able to be free if they had a choice to be. I think the little girl and boy are still here with the shadow and the young man. I can still hear her crying at night sometimes. The monk later told the landlord they won't leave until she does. He also told her that I am close to the spirit world and removing me could anger them in her house. The importance of that is that my landlord's son had a crush on me and wanted to have a relationship with me. But I was still waiting for Mark. He got upset and tried to threaten to kick me out for not giving him a chance. So it's nice in that way, that even in death and being unseen, that they're still protecting me. Just a random tenant in a random room in their home. And so here I am, still in this room. Nothing bad has happened to Mark or I. It's just nice knowing we're not entirely alone, no matter how alone we may feel. 5. So I've had some weird stuff going on where I live. I currently live in a split-level house with my girlfriend, my grandma, my mom, and my brother. My girlfriend and I have the downstairs area to ourselves while they have the upper floor. When we first moved here, we didn't pay much attention to the weird stuff that happened, but over time, things became more noticeable. We have this back room that used to be the reptile room and office. When that was still the case, we would hear banging in the room, like one of the tank lids were being pushed on, and then snapping back down. I assumed this was one of the snakes attempting an escape. However, I soon realized this was not the case as I started going to check as soon as I heard the noise. All the snakes would be in their hide boxes. They're all too big to get back into their hide boxes this fast, so there is no way it was one of them. During this time, we would also hear stuff being dropped or knocked over, but when we would check, nothing had been moved. There was an incident where I had gone to the kitchen upstairs while my girlfriend was taking a shower. She didn't know I was up there at the time. She had gotten out, and while she was drying off, she heard my voice calling her into that back room, and the sound came from that room. When I came down the stairs as she walked out of the back room, she was visibly startled and confused. A few months ago, I converted that room into a kitchen and moved the animals to a different room. We still hear noises, but things started happening in other rooms. We have a sliding glass door to the backyard in our living area. The lock is busted, so we keep a PVC pipe in the track so it can't be opened from the outside. We very rarely use this door for anything and put the pipe back every time since someone had tried to break in once. I've come to notice that sometimes the pipe is just not in the track. I've asked everyone in the house if they have used this door for any reason and no one has touched it. We started putting a brick on top of the pipe, and it doesn't seem to move anymore. Since that stopped, if I'm awake in the middle of the night and it's quiet, the deadbolt in the front door will loudly unlock itself with no sound of a key. Sound is oddly amplified where the front door is, so anything touching that door is very audible from our living area, including when someone puts a key in the lock to unlock the door. I had heard it once when I was at the bottom of the stairs. I went to check, and it was definitely unlocked. My mom and grandma never leave this door unlocked. Doesn't matter who is home. They lock the door when they close it every single time. Something I've also noticed is that my things tend to go missing and reappear in odd places. Usually it's things I use often, like my ceramic travel mug. But sometimes it's also things I rarely touch. I hadn't had a problem with this until we had moved in here. Something I didn't know until recently is that my girlfriend had been experiencing things touching her. Our computer desks used to be in our bedroom. When she would sit at her desk, sometimes she would feel something touch her leg. She said it felt like someone put their hand on her thigh and squeezed for a moment, then let go. It usually happened when I was asleep, and she was worried about freaking me out by telling me, but I had a similar experience when she was at work. I wasn't feeling well and ended up crashing for a bit. I woke up to what felt like someone grabbing my ankle, but when I looked, no one was there. Once we moved the desks, the touching stopped. I'm assuming because we're not in the bedroom much anymore. With all this, I wanted to do a cleansing in the house with some sage. But I have a bit of a problem. My grandma has COPD. Burning stuff like that can cause her serious problems since she doesn't use breathing treatments. She only has an emergency inhaler. I don't think anything bad will come of all this, but it's still concerning. Any suggestions? Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 5 True Paranormal Stories, episode 261. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. If you enjoyed the video, then please do share it with all your friends and family, and loved ones both living and deceased. Now, let's see, this is New Year's Eve. Right, so in advance, I hope you all have a lovely new year. If you're one of those people who likes to stay up to see the turn of the clock, I am. I'm always up at that time anyway, but I like to be able to see the turn of the clock. Or you're someone who just turns in early and waits for the day to be there when you wake up. Whatever you choose to do, I hope you have a wonderful, happy, and peaceful time. And that there aren't lots of people letting off fireworks. And if you are letting off fireworks, try and keep it to a minimum, okay? Think of the neighbors. That mostly goes for my neighbors, not that they're listening to this, but, you know, it's always nice to be considerate of people. Okay, and with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourself.